All right. Thank you everyone for joining us and for sharing all these throwbacks to early social media in the chat. We're going to go ahead and get started and talk about how you can use tools on the internet for community engagement journalism. Introduce myself. I'm Chelsea Naughton, the digital engagement manager, digital content manager, excuse me, for America Amplified. I think most of you know my background as the digital editor at KUER for about 6 years before I joined on the America Amplified team. Everyone else introduce themselves who's hosting.
Yeah, I'm Matt Rasnic. I'm the training supervisor here at America Amplified. Also worked as a digital producer of a few publications as well. And I'm excited for today's training, and I'll kick it over to Lindsey.
Hello, I'm Lindsey Erdody. I'm the digital editor for the education and health teams at WFYI. So our health team is Side Effects Public Media, for those of you who are aware with that. So, yeah.
All right, so what is digital engagement? We sort of hear this term thrown around. I like to think of it just as community engagement via the internet, because we don't need a new word for everything we do. We're just doing the things that we do in person with tools online. And that sounds a lot less daunting than trying to wrap your head around an entirely new concept of digital engagement. So there's a lot of tools out there for digital engagement, or tools one can use when you're doing community engagement journalism online, and it gets pretty overwhelming, but it really doesn't have to be, because digital is a huge umbrella term that can encompass everything from podcasts to your live stream to your social media, pretty much everything that lives online. So instead of just talking about every single thing that's out there, we're just going to focus on 4 platforms and tools within them that you are probably already using. Facebook and Facebook groups, Instagram, and especially its live tools, Twitter and Twitter Spaces. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can organize your website to enhance what you're doing on these third-party platforms. But to get started, and I also just want to say there is going to be, even though we're paring it down from all of those tools to just 4, there's going to be a lot of information coming at you pretty fast. So we're going to have a handout that we'll share after. And please drop questions into the chat, and or feel free to pipe in and ask questions by raising your hand. We're going to start with the basics because, like I said, you can do the same engagement that you do in person online, which means you can do community engagement as well as audience engagement. And sometimes it's hard to know which to do. Luckily, we can do both, and they're both good. Basically, community engagement is engagement that reaches beyond the people who listen to you, and audience engagement is likely what you're already doing on your existing Facebook pages, reaching your core audiences. So pop quiz time. A call out on your Facebook page for people to share their experiences with high gas prices. Drop into the chat whether that is community engagement or audience engagement. You see a community, a bunch of audience, a few more communities. All right, time's up. It is audience engagement because you're reaching the audience that is already engaged with you on your page. There's a chance that it could get shared beyond, but the core effort there is asking people who are already part of your listening, who've already bought into who you are. You're engaging with them, but it's your audience. A call out on a neighborhood Facebook group for people to share their experiences with supply chain issues at the grocery store. Another chat. Bunch of community. It looks like there's a wild consensus there that that is community engagement. You've entered into a new space. You don't know whether or not these people are part of your audience or not. You're hopefully reaching a lot of people who aren't part of your audience and hearing from way more people than your core audience. So community engagement. A reporter does a takeover and Q&A on a local influencer's Instagram feed for a day, community or audience engagement. Dun, 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 dun. Everybody in the chat is right with community engagement. Last one, really quick. Have a reporter do a takeover on your Instagram stories for a live Q&A. Audience. And they're both good. They both serve a purpose. You will likely continue to do audience engagement as you add community engagement to your social media practices. And the community engagement that you do will likely engage your audience as well. It's just good to know the difference when you are doing an activity. If you are hoping to reach somebody new that isn't part of your core audience and you're just posting to your Facebook page, you're probably not going to reach them. So thinking about how we can get off of our Facebook page and into other places to do that community engagement, push the envelope a little bit. So we're going to have Matt start first and talk about how we can do that on Facebook.
All right. Hello, everyone. Just kind of jumping in for Facebook there. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. All right, can y'all see that? All right, I think so. Great. So kind of starting out here with Facebook, one thing is that I'd like everyone to kind of consider. I know that some places I've been, the newsroom runs the social media accounts, whether that's the Facebook page or other things like that. So, but I've also been at places where it's kind of a shared effort across departments. So it requires a little bit of working together. So as you kind of see who's in the driver's seat with your organization, you might have to tailor some of these tips and tricks to, you know, work as a group to achieve what you're trying to do. And so from there, one thing I'd like to really touch on today is Facebook groups. Facebook groups are fantastic. Separate from your Facebook page, each page can have its own groups, and these can be topical. These can be, as the examples here, WBEZ education. So maybe that's where you can build out, maybe you have a strong local education community in your area and you're doing a lot of good reporting in that area. So you'll want to find a place where you can build kind of a segmented audience that's particularly interested in local education stories. And what I've found with using Facebook groups is you can often get higher quality engagement. There is a slight barrier to entry when doing a Facebook group, requires someone to kind of seek that out and join if interested, which I think tends to kind of elevate the conversation because the folks that are there are particularly invested. This is also a great way if you have an account that you share across your organization with the different departments. It's a great way for you to kind of segment your audience. Those who are coming to your station for local arts and entertainment news might be different than the folks that are coming there for daily news, breaking news, that kind of thing. So this is a great way that you can kind of start segmenting your audience within your Facebook page. So it can also be a great tool for your reporters. They can be in there, they can not only be sharing their content, but they can also use this as a platform to find new story ideas or find new sources and things of that nature as well. Facebook groups also tend to tend to raise the number of returning users and lead to more loyal readers on your site which in turn could turn to more engaged members potentially when it comes to pledge drive season. So from there, for those of you maybe looking or thinking about starting a Facebook group, here's a couple steps to get that Facebook group up and running. And like I said, a lot of these tools or these tips might just need to be tweaked a little bit depending on what kind of project you're hoping to achieve, whether that's engaging your current audience or doing some community engagement as well. So first you want to identify your target audience. So we're going to use local education again as the example. So your target audience here is probably going to be parents of school-age children. From there, you want to set your rules of engagement. This is important so that anyone who's joining this group or this public forum understands what's expected of them as a member of this group. And that way, if people do violate these rules, you're able to say, hey, you agreed to these rules and you're not following them. We can't have you in this chat or in this group anymore because we are trying to make a positive space for quality discussion. So with that, I also say you should probably make your group private. I know private kind of goes against the whole public media mantra, but what I mean by private is that people can still find the group or you can still share the group out, but it requires people to agree to these rules before they're allowed to join. So by doing that, you can hold people accountable to make sure that they're following the rules. You can also use it as a tool to maybe collect email addresses from your readers that you can add to newsletter content or newsletter signups and things like that, or potentially reach out to some of your most loyal people when it comes to pledge drive season to get those donations in. Kind of the next step then would be to promote your group. You want to probably start out doing some strategic invitations. If it's a local Facebook group or Facebook group on education, maybe you go to a school board meeting, print out some little quarter sheet flyers of saying, hey, like we're creating a space to start more productive conversations in our community about local education. Invite some, strategic people from the education community, whether that's school board members or local teachers or administrators. This way, you'll kind of start out with a good chunk of people that are invested in this that can potentially spread the word and share it to more people who may be engaged with the education community that you may not be able to reach yet. And so from there, you'll kind of want to spread the responsibility. When it comes to these kind of pages, you can really kind of spread the work across maybe multiple reporters or some editors, or even perhaps you're going to ask some of your community advisory board members to join in on the chat. Maybe you have some board members that are parents of school-age children that are kind of still involved in the conversation. So you can also kind of lean on them to help when it comes to moderating or starting conversations in your group. Typically what I would say is if you're starting out, try to post like twice a week. And this doesn't have to be just a promo to your story. You can post questions for your audience. What things are you all interested in? You can do call outs for sources here. And then you can also just start some like open discussions on whatever topics are coming up in the news related to education. This is a great place, like I said before, to find new sources, find more diverse sources as you expand your group's reach. And so that's kind of a couple steps there that you can use to create these groups and kind of create a conversation around whatever your group is. So I've used a lot of examples here with education news, but it could also be, maybe it's a Facebook group for your sustaining members. And it gives you a chance for your reporters to drop stories in here and add a little context of, I wrote this story and here's something I didn't expect going into it, but I found as I was reporting. So keeping those kind of conversations where people get to see how this work is being done and directly interact with the people that are doing it is a great way to kind of build your audience. From there, you can also join existing Facebook groups. This is where you kind of need to kind of take a couple of steps back and really think about what are the best groups for you to be in. Continuing with the example of public education, maybe your community already has a very active Facebook group about education in your community. So find those groups, see if how active they are. And then if it's appropriate, then join that group or request to join that group, but make sure that you understand their rules of engagement. Because at the end of the day, it's not your Facebook group. And so you want to make sure that you're being respectful of those of that space that they've already created. And when you join, introduce yourself. Talk about why you're joining the group, what work you do, what you hope to gain from joining that group. And just don't be a parachuter. What I mean by that is jumping in, dropping a link to your story, and then running away. You know, try to use this as a place where you can connect with a community that's already pre-established and use it as a tool not only to better your reporting, but better their understanding of the local issues. But also understand that you might invite yourself or try to join a group and they might say no. You know, some people don't want that kind of, they don't want reporters, or they don't want, they've tailored their group to be a certain crowd. And if that's the case, you know, accept that and maybe try to find a different group, or maybe try to start your own group so that you can start those conversations on your own. Any questions on Facebook groups before we go on? Let me see, here's the chat. Or feel free to unmute if you have any questions. And we'll also do some questions at the end if you need. All right. Oh, here we go. Is there a limit to how often you should post? I would say no. I would say, you know, you don't want to spam the group with, you know, dozens of posts a week. But I think if you are trying to, you know, provoke some conversation, you can definitely do, you know, I used as the starting point, maybe 2 posts a week until you start building that community. But, you know, you can also let people know that they can post in the group as well. If people have questions or want to start discussions on certain topics, invite members of the group to start those conversations too. So I think no limit, but doing what kind of is natural and what kind of feels best for the group. I was just thinking how a lot of these principles can apply to WhatsApp groups as well. That's absolutely true. As Chelsea kind of mentioned early on, a lot of these tools can definitely be shared across different platforms, especially as new platforms become more rapidly or more widely used. They can definitely be kind of shared across the platforms. All right. So there's some other ways that you can also use your Facebook groups.
Actually, sorry, Matt, I had a question.
Oh, yes.
I was just wondering if anybody in this audience has had experience joining Facebook groups, and if you have some thoughts on what works and what doesn't. And I don't know if KOSU is on this, that they've had some experience with that.
Yes,
If
Natalie.
not, that's okay.
Yeah, we've been at KUNR. Our main focus was trying to join Spanish language Facebook groups in Northern Nevada. And so working with some community members, we identified, I want to say about 4 groups. And so when we do Facebook Lives and things like that, we'll make sure to share those in there. But I think it's more a question of like what Matt was mentioning as far as how to not be a parachuter, right? Like we post in there when we have something for them. But how do we just kind of maintain a presence in there is where we are with it, but we definitely are trying to keep that avenue open.
I wanted to weigh in too. We have experience with Facebook groups with our environment reporter, and instead of like us posting the link, what has happened a couple of times was there was kind of a controversial issue where someone in the group had posted our story, and it's really, I think, important to have the reporter there to combat any misinformation as people kind of process on their own the story or try to kind of make sense of it. Particularly, like I said, it was a little more controversial of an issue. Really organized Facebook groups was great. Not only did it help with sourcing, but then we could talk back if some people misunderstood the article.
Yeah, that's really great. Joshua, you're asking, are you posting as a station account or your personal account? I found the best practice, the best way to get that engagement is usually through your personal account. Whether you have a separate account that you use just for your journalism work, I think that it's a little easier for people to connect when they can kind of see someone's face and it's not just a logo kind of talking to them. So.
Yeah, and I've heard advice that you should have like maybe not your personal Facebook account, but like a work journalism Facebook account.
Absolutely. All right, let's head on. And we're going to start talking about some other ways that you can use Facebook. So here's just a few ideas of different ways that you can kind of streamline your Facebook usage to maximize your reach. And so part of that is going to be live streaming your talk show. So if you have a daily talk show, set your folks up via Zoom. Chances are you might be doing that already because of the pandemic. So set that up and you can live stream your Zoom straight to your Facebook Live. As you'll see here in this example, it allows people to come in and ask questions as the interviews are going on, which is a great way to kind of engage folks during the show as well as after. And from there, you can also use things like automated messages in your Messenger account. So if people are messaging your page, based on keywords, you can set up certain responses. And it may not be an exact answer to their question, but it could be something simple as they message you at 10 o'clock at night saying, hey, like, thanks for sending us a message. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Just so that people know, somebody is monitoring this account. Somebody's going to potentially get back to you. If you don't have somebody that can regularly check your Facebook messages, maybe you set up an automated message that says, hey, like, we appreciate you reaching out. The best way to get in touch with us quickly is through email, and you can email this email address. So that gives people kind of a way that they can get to you more quickly if email or a different way of communication is better. You can also host Facebook Live events. These can be town hall styles. So if you have maybe a new reporter who's covering a new beat at your station, you can do a town hall where you invite folks in. You do a little talking of what this new reporter plans to cover, what they're hoping to do with the coverage that they're going to be producing. And you can ask other people for what their feedback is. What stories do they want to hear in this new coverage? You can also do this to bring in guests and have discussions as a way to reach different audiences. So if you're bringing in community leaders that have their own following, you can invite them to join your Facebook Live and ask them to share it with their communities. So a great way to do some community and audience engagement all wrapped into one. And then from there, you'll notice at the top of most Facebook pages now, there's the little blue button off to the right. You can personalize that. You can change that to say donate, or you can say, hey, click here to sign up for our newsletter. So use that to your advantage as well as people are coming to visit your page. And along with all of this, it becomes, how do you measure the success on Facebook? We know how to do all of the quantitative ways when it comes to link clicks and likes, comments, and shares. Facebook gives us a lot of data. Unlike Club Penguin, it does give us a lot of that raw data that you can use to see how well your stuff is working as well. But things that are more qualitative is how people are sharing your content. Are they sending it to friends via direct message? So that might depict somebody read a story and had, oh, this made me think of this person, let me send it to them. Are they sharing it into their feed with comments about the reporting? So looking to see if they've shared it to their feed and they've written something above it, what are they saying? Are they asking questions that weren't answered in the reporting? Are they adding context that you didn't have when you were reporting? And then you can also use this as a way for questions that people ask in the comments, which can spark potentially more reporting or shine light on potential new sources when it comes to things of that nature. So that was kind of a quick wrap up of Facebook groups and other tools that you can use for Facebook. And if anyone has any questions, do we want to take those now, Chelsea, or do you want to take those toward the end?
We can take a couple now and then any at the end as well. We're about halfway through our hour. So
awesome. Great. Well, I will kick it over back to Chelsea.
Back to my screen here. Okay, so we are past this. On to Instagram. So I am going to present this part of Instagram making a few assumptions. One is that your organization already has an Instagram profile and posts there with some regularity. And then I want to just take a quick poll for some Instagram literacy so that I don't go too deep into things that you already know or skim over things that you don't. So Matt, can you pull that poll up for me, or do I need it? Oh, there it is. All right, does everyone have a poll?
Yeah.
So do you use Instagram stories? Do you use interactive stickers on your stories? Do you add topical highlights that are specific? Do you ever go live on Instagram? Do you post reels on your Instagram? All right. It looks like most people have filled in the quorum. So as you can see, obviously, most of you are using stories. You do have highlights as well. Not everyone is using stickers. Not everyone's going live. And not everyone is using reels. So that's kind of what I thought we might see, and go from there. Thank you. So I'm not going to talk a ton about what your feed itself should look like, the grid on your page, but one question that people ask a lot is whether they should have a like text-based post and a short caption, or a like really pretty picture and a long caption, or a pretty picture and no caption. Like, what should a post look like for an organization? Instagram's a visual medium, so you need to catch their attention. That said, there's been a like decent amount of research out there showing that a longer caption will get more comments. Basically, your words are inviting their words in response. And I thought that was really interesting. And a longer caption, and these studies came from about 500 to 750 characters. Your image still needs to be good, or else they'll scroll right past it. But as Drake says, both is ideal. The Texas Tribune does a really great job of sharing posts in this way. So they have a lot of text-based posts. Can everybody see their feed that I'm saying? Cool. I want to make sure I opened up the second tab. So they share information on that post, which then makes it really shareable via stories. That information people can share directly into their story and inform people that way. And then their caption itself is really informative too. So as people are scrolling through their feed, they're getting informed in that way as well. And then you can see they get a lot of interaction on their posts via comments, and studies are that have looked into that are basically attributing it to the longer caption. That's the correlation. So I thought that was really interesting. I think that that's a really small tip that you can implement and up your feed game quickly. One way that we can use Instagram for audience engagement is through call outs on your own feed. Call for responses through stories and posts. So this is an example from KQED asking 2 questions that they hope to get responses from their audience on, and they will accept responses in the comments via email or voicemail, and then they go back and cover the story that way. It's a really basic community engagement tool that we talk about a lot, and when you're posting it on your feed itself, it's most likely going to be audience that you're reaching. Once it's done, it's important to make sure that you do create that story again, and you can share those stories directly on your Instagram as well. So that's just a touch of audience engagement via callouts really fast. Does anyone have questions about that? It feels 101 stuff. Cool. The next one that I'd like to talk about is a reporter takeover Q&A on your own Instagram feed. via your stories. So going live or throughout the day doing an Ask Me Anything. There are a lot of ways that you can do this. The most engaging is a video like this where the reporter who did the story or is covering a certain topic comes on and actually speaks to the audience and tells them the answers in a video. You can always answer those questions via text on a post, but that face-to-face view of the reporter is always going to get more engagement and interaction on a post. So there, you want to get your reporter talking about something that has a theme. You don't just want to have them come on there and in general, just like, ask me anything. You need to tell them why they're there. You can use it as an opportunity to introduce a new reporter and their beat and solicit questions about that. But it's best if you have it narrowly focused on, like, this is the thing that we just covered. Here's the story. Like, what do you want to know? I'm here to answer all of it. The other ways that you can do that are in your stories using that interactive Ask Me a Question sticker. So you'll want to pre-promote that you're doing this. You can promote it in your feed and in your stories. The reporter can promote that they're doing it. And then once you actually start doing the story, this is my favorite way to do it, not via a cat, but via your stories and a sticker. It curates all of those questions that people are submitting in, and then you can send them to your reporter, have them record a video answering the question, or send you text back answering that question and answering it live in your feed. And then once you're done, you post that in your highlights. And this is just basically like an incongruous live listening session or Q&A. So this can be going on all day while the story is live, and you can just sort of like mix in answering the questions as your day goes along, and the social media person can send the questions to the reporter. If the reporter has access, they can just check the Instagram throughout the day and answer those questions themselves. So it doesn't require you to be like in a place for a specific amount of time, which is really nice about these Instagram 24-hour Ask Me Anythings. And they last, the story will stay up on your profile for 24 hours unless you tell it not to. And then you can put it in your highlights. So it's finite, but it's not something that you have to do all at once. Collaborations and takeovers. This is when you're trying to get on somebody else's feed or getting somebody else on your feed. And that's kind of when it goes into the community engagement mode. There are people who might be really influential in the community that you're wanting to reach on Instagram and have a lot of trust built there, and getting an opportunity to go live and do one of these Q&As on their stories is a really great way to introduce yourself to them and build some trust. And so there's some, I like to think of like the ways that you can do a collaboration as like the low effort, medium effort, and higher effort ways, and they all have different rewards. So lower effort would be just asking community leaders or organizations to share their content or your content on their profile. So just like sharing your post into their stories or reposting something with credit to you onto their feed. Basically just introducing you to their audience and raising awareness of who you are. That's pretty much the lowest entry point of a like collab trade that you can do on Instagram. The more medium effort would be to invite the collaborator to do a takeover on your feed, because you're not the one that has to continue to answer those questions. It's a little less effort on your end. that brings them over and introduces that organization or community leader to your audience and has them, allows your audience to ask the questions of them. It builds a mutual awareness of the station to their audience potentially if they're carrying them over with them. And so if they tell people on their profile, I'm doing a takeover on KOSU, come watch my Q&A tomorrow. Some of their audience might come with them, but most the broader folks who are going to see it are people who already follow you, learning about them. And then the most effort on your end is when you host a live Q&A on the other organization's profile. But as far as community engagement goes, that's perhaps the most rewarding as far as introducing yourself and building trust to their audience. You have all that face time with them. You're vetted on their profile as somebody who that community organization or leader says they should trust. And you get to educate all of their audience about whatever it is that you're doing the Q&A on. But then you are the one who is throughout the day answering all those questions and curating responses and everything. So how do you get onto their feed? Send them a DM, follow them, and ask them to share their content. Perhaps you already have a relationship with this organization outside of Instagram or with this person outside of Instagram, but if you don't, sliding into their DMs is really what you would do. Or you can ask to do this if you have a off Instagram relationship. You can just ask them like, hey, I'd really like to, you have a really active Instagram. We'd love to do some sort of collaboration with you. And then after you've agreed to that, make sure that what you're sharing is what their audience is craving. Don't, like, you might already know that they are an education organization, and so they want your education content, but maybe there's a specific kind of education content that they're missing. Make sure that you're still doing that super important community listening that we talk about all the time when you're deciding what you're going to do in these collaborations. And then your homework coming out of this would be to connect with the profiles of 3 people or organizations that are reaching a community that you hope to engage with, and see how you might be able to cross promote content or even potentially do one of these live collaborations. Any questions about collaborations and live Q&As?
We've got one question here. How do you handle giving people access/passwords to Instagram for these takeovers, or do you ask people to send you the content that you can post?
So I've done it both ways. And when we had enough people in my last newsroom that we could not require the reporter to have access via Instagram, we just had the reporters take the selfie videos or Slack us the answer to a question. And as the social media managers, we would post that ourselves without having to like have the password tossed around to a bunch of different people. I think that that is potentially the ideal as far as like making sure that everything looks similar. Like you don't have to teach someone your branding style on Instagram. You know how it's going to look and how it sounds and where it's going to go. But if you do have a smaller shop, or if the reporter would just really like is a pretty Instagram savvy and just wants to take that video and post it themselves, you can give somebody access and then revoke it later. So you can, within the admin side of your Instagram account, add somebody as a profile admin. And then since you're the super admin, you can delete them as an admin later. You can also create a temporary password that you change it to just for that takeover, and then change the password back to what it is, and that'll boot them out. So both of those are totally viable options. You will, if you're doing it yourself and having the reporters send you the content, you will want to come up with the best, like cleanest way for them to share that content with you. At my last station, most of us had iPhones, and we would just create a shared album and photos that they would put things in and Slack me any text that should go with it. And that was the most like seamless way for us to do it. You can create a separate Slack channel where that's being uploaded. You could use Google Photos and use that app on your phone. And that's also pretty seamless. But make sure that you've established how that you're going to share those like potentially larger video files beforehand, because there's nothing more annoying than like getting going and like not being able to download the file off Slack, or like getting a really grainy image off of an email attachment or something. So make sure that you've tested that and established it beforehand. Any other collab questions? Cool. This, as far as informing and on your Instagram as a form of audience engagement, this is often the end result of a community engagement outreach project. So you found out what the audience needs or what the community needs, and then you take that and turn it into an infographic. So this is an example that Chalkbeat did after a call out at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they made a super visual flow chart that they've then posted to Instagram. This is also a concept that we talk about a lot with our infographics as engagement content. Because once you have it, you can then share it to those profiles and to organizations and leaders who have access to the communities that asked for this information. So Instagram can just be a really great place to share that type of information. And then entertainment, you can use your Instagram to both inform and entertain at the same time. So after you've shared your stories all week, for example, reward people by making them feel smart with like a super easy 5-question quiz at the end of the week. When we started doing this at KUER, it was the most interacted with story every single week. People would screenshot and share their answers and comment on the story after they like answered a question about it. It was just a really surprisingly engaging or interactive way to use our stories. And that was using the quiz button and sticker, which is built in to Instagram when you're in the create mode. So those stickers that are already in there, people are used to using them on their personal profiles. And when you use the ones on that they're used to using on your professional profile, they really, like, as we've seen, that people take to it really quickly and are ready to interact with you in that way. So a little bit of homework on that one. Just think about an upcoming story that you could build a simple infographic around to share on your Instagram. Twitter, Lindsey is going to spend a good amount of time talking to us about Twitter Spaces, but I just wanted to remind us about the most tried and true call out method, which is the Twitter call out. I think that it is one of the most basic but reliable ways to get call outs. The platform is made for this type of thing. Ask a question, get responses in threads, have people retweet it. You can definitely reach out to people who you think have a following that would be likely to answer this question or this call out. So make sure that when you do the call out, you reach out to those people and ask them to retweet it, and don't feel bad about doing that. That's, you want the answers. They're happy most of the time to do it. And if they're not, it was just a question. So just old reliable is basically what that is. And then I'll toss it over to Lindsey for some Twitter spaces.
Yeah, Twitter spaces, like I put on the slide, it's not that scary, I promise. It's really just the way to have like a live conversation with your audience on Twitter. So if you think of it kind of in the same way of like Facebook Live or Instagram Live, this is the Twitter version of it. It's audio only, there's no video, which we have actually found we loved. And people can join in as just listeners without being able to ask questions, or they can take live questions. So I'm far from an absolute expert on this. We'll just tell you, WFYI has done about 9 or 10 of these so far, and we did them every Friday morning during Indiana's legislative session to talk about education legislation. And so all of this is kind of based on my experience with that, and then tuning into a bunch of other ones over the past couple months. So if you want to move to the next slide. So the first thing I would suggest you do if you're like, okay, yes, let's use this tool, is think about, what you want to talk about on it, and what could be kind of this like value add for your audience. Is it something that's really complicated that could be better explained in a live conversation? Is it something that you can expand on your reporting a little bit, something that you couldn't get out in the story that then you can go into greater detail? Is there this like really interesting backstory to some investigation that you just did that's worth like peeling back the curtain and letting your audience understand like how you got that? Is there someone really interesting that's worth interviewing live on Twitter Spaces, and then taking that audio later and using it in a story somehow? Is there a big breaking news event where your reporter is out there and can come on Twitter Spaces and take a few questions and explain a little bit about what's going on? And then, even if they don't have all the answers to the questions that are coming in, they can then take those questions and then go inform the reporting that they can then go do while they're still out there. Or, is there community partners that can come on and explain things that they're seeing, some issue that's kind of bubbling up? And then the big thing to think about is, is there an audience for it on Twitter? Because, are people talking about it on Twitter? Is there already some sort of discussion about it? So for us, education legislation, there's a pretty active Twitter community in Indiana and Indianapolis specifically, talking about the legislative session. So we felt like that was a good place for us to have that conversation. And think about the timing of it. Do you want it to be regularly scheduled? Is this just kind of like a pop-up Twitter Spaces? What time is gonna make sense for the audience that's on Twitter that you're trying to reach? For us, 9 a.m. Friday mornings made a lot of sense because legislative session kind of wraps everything up every week on Thursday afternoons. So, we could have nice recaps Friday morning, and we felt like it was a time, we did it at 9. So like our local newscasts were done by 9. We weren't pulling anything away from that. It just seemed to make sense. I saw a question come in. So are there any restrictions to re-airing Twitter Space conversations as a show, like you're doing a live show on there? As far as I know, the only thing I will say that makes it somewhat difficult, so you can record Twitter Spaces. It is difficult to get that recording straight from Twitter. You almost need to like re-record it or kind of like strip that audio out. But you can use that audio however you would like to use that audio. NPR, I've talked to some people at NPR about how they've done it, and they've done it that way. They've kind of done it both ways, back and forth with it. But the downloading thing is clunky, because you have to download your entire Twitter data archive to get the recordings, which is just kind of a mess. But you can replay it, and any similar way you'd be like recording a meeting you're streaming or anything like that, you can record the audio that way and get it that way. And there are some other kind of more in-depth ways I think that NPR has done it, and I can talk more about that offline if you want to, and share what NPR shared with me. But yeah, you can do what you want with it. So back to where I was here. So yeah, then think about who is best to come on and talk about it. We used a lot of our reporters. We used reporters from other outlets. Feel free to kind of think broadly about it, because by doing that, you're then reaching new audiences potentially. So for us, partnering with some of the Indianapolis Star reporters to come on, then we started reaching some people who were on the Indianapolis Star's Twitter feed versus only our Twitter feed. And we saw in the ones where we went outside of our bubble, if you will, we had more people tuning into it. So don't necessarily just limit it to your own reporters. Don't necessarily limit it to just reporters. Think about, like I said, community experts, national experts, whoever might be the best to come on and talk about, whatever the topic might be. And then my suggestion would be to offer that co-hosting spot. Spaces lets you do like a co-hosting thing. And offer that to whoever you're having come on, if that makes sense. Like if it's a reporter at another station, we did that with any reporter that came on. So the Star was a co-host, and that again just like helps get it in front of more of their audience. And really, it's a win-win for everyone involved, right? We get to maybe start to reach their audience because they're retweeting us and sharing it, and then they're also showing, hey, look, our reporter is on this thing. Moving on here. There's another question, and Chelsea is warning everybody, we might go over, we will go over a little bit. We're at 3:56. But yeah, if there are any questions, let any of us know. What about the opposite? Can you broadcast existing audio interviews on Twitter Space, or does it have to be live to the platform? So I do know there is some way to do this, but I do not think it is easy. So NPR, for example, streamed in the State of the Union, and then they did like a pre-analysis with reporters, streamed the State of the Union, and then had reporters back on afterwards to do an analysis. And I know that it was a very complicated process for NPR to figure out. We have not tried to do it on our end. The only way we've piped in audio has been like playing it from a computer and having it on there, which is not great, and I don't recommend it. But yeah, so there is a way, and I can give you, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can give you the NPR contact, and he'd be happy to talk to whoever about it, if that is something you're interested in. So, once you've got this figured out, when you're going to do it, who's going to be on it, what you're going to talk about, you can schedule them, which is really nice. And then it gives you a link. Start sharing that link out, and it will have a set reminder button. So then people can get that, and then they'll get an alert when your space is starting. That link also changes to like a join live button once you're live. So if someone's seeing that tweet later on, that's what it turns into. And if you record it, that link turns into a play recording button after it's done. So it's really nice that like it's one link and it always just changes to what it needs to be at that moment. Have a rough script for what you want to cover, just general questions. I would suggest keeping it pretty casual though. And then doing kind of this like quick run of show meeting ahead of time. We found that to be really helpful. So like I said, ours were Friday mornings. On Thursday afternoons, we would do a pre-meeting with whoever was going to be on it, run over the script really quickly, and kind of explain the technical details. Make sure you're on your phone if you're going to be a speaker, because you can't be a speaker if you're on a desktop. Make sure you've got headphones in your phone, because that helps a little bit with the audio quality. You're going to get a thing that's going to pop up and say, WFYI News has offered you speaking privileges. You're going to accept them. Just little things like that, I think really helped us run these pretty smoothly. I've joined some other ones where you've got people joining and they're not really sure what they're doing, and it's, can you hear me now? And all these, they're doing all these technical working out things live, and it just doesn't sound as well, right? And that also helps make sure everyone knows what their job will be. So like our community engagement person, for example, was running the back end technical things. She was giving people the co-host privileges, the speaking privileges. And I knew, that I would come on and be the host, and we knew another community engagement person was the one pinning tweets at the top, because that's a neat little feature that you can do with it. We had those picked out in advance, and we knew, who would be doing that. So just really, really helpful. And feel free to like do a trial run. I would suggest doing it on maybe some personal accounts. So not, because you can't really do them in private. so people might notice and people might join it. We did that before we started them, and we had a couple people join, and we'd be like, oh, we're just practicing, see you later. And it works fine. But then that way you get used to it, because if you're thinking about like, oh gosh, like this sounds great, but like I'm just worried, like in the moment, how I would do all those things. That's one way to kind of to go through that. You want to go to the next slide? And Elisa shared for me, thank you. Matt Adams is the Twitter Spaces guru. Thank you. And yeah, he's fantastic and is encouraging everyone to do Twitter Spaces. So he'd be happy to talk more with anyone, I'm sure. So once you're live, one thing we didn't really think about at the beginning is the dead airtime at the start and how to fill that. Because if you're joining and there's no one talking, you kind of wonder if you're in the right spot or if your audio is working. Same thing with the recording of it. You're thinking, is this actually working or not? We decided to fill ours with music from the small studio sessions that WFYI does. Worked really well for us. It's kind of like elevator music in the beginning. Like I said, that was just our community engagement person, like playing that from her computer and having her phone there. And that's how the music got in. So it's kind of clunky. It didn't sound amazing by any means, but it let people know that the audio is working, they're in the right spot, prevented me from having to repeatedly come on and say, hey, we'll get started in a few minutes, and then waiting 10 seconds and then 3 more people join and, hey, we'll get started in a few minutes. Like that just always felt really awkward to me, and sounds weird in the recording. So that's how we did it. But if anyone has other ideas or comes up with other ideas, please share them with me, because would love to hear them. We also would have a Slack conversation on the side. So, it was me and the community engagement people who were helping run it. If we had anything come up during it, we found that to be really helpful. Was also really helpful for when you were taking live audience questions. If we had questions coming in through messages or through tweeting at us, they would share them in there. And then that's how I would see them and know to ask them. Just highly recommend knowing how you're going to communicate offline while you're in this live conversation. Seeing some other things in the chat. Can you define, sure, is there a recommended time to run the space? We did ours for 20 to 25 minutes, kind of our sweet spot. I think our last one ran a little longer and was about 30 minutes. This is a total, I'm just kind of making this up as I go thing. I would say you need to at least make sure you've got enough stuff to talk about for 15 minutes, because I'm thinking about how people need to join and need to be able to see it. And then there still needs to be like something that was worth their time to listen to. And then on the other end of things, I think 30 minutes is a good chunk of time for them. I know from the State of the Union one, the NPR did, they said that was way too long. And I don't think they were thrilled about it, because it's a really long time for someone to sit there in a live conversation. So that's kind of the other end of the spectrum, right? Like I think that one was like an hour and a half long. But personally, I think that 30 minutes or under is kind of a sweet spot for it. Yeah, and like I said, take live audience questions. We were very scared to in the beginning, and Matt from NPR actually kind of encouraged us to do it. You can set some guidelines in advance, kind of like have like rules of the room that you lay out. Make sure, you're not taking questions. I've actually seen people take questions from people who have private Twitter accounts, but Matt was saying, don't do it from anyone who has a private Twitter account, do it from public Twitter accounts. Look at their Twitter profile before you give them speaking privileges. Look at their last couple of tweets to see, you know, what's going on. And then if things start to go bad for some reason, the nice thing is you have the ability to take away those speaking privileges from someone. You can mute them at any time. You can also kick them out of the space. You can block them from the space. So you're in total control at all times. So that's kind of why we said, you know what, all right, let's do it. We ended up not having anyone who wanted to come on and speak live, but we did get a lot more questions through direct messages and through tweeting at us when we did that. And yeah, and then you can also, like I said earlier, pin the tweets at the top to kind of direct people to the coverage that you're talking about. I think I have one more slide. Yeah, so if you, like I said earlier with the recording, think about what you want to do with it, how you're going to download it, if you want to download it at all, totally up to you. I would suggest sharing it again once that recording's there. We saw all our numbers go up every single time afterwards, from number of live listeners to the number of listeners who came on and listened to the recording. And then we also tracked everything. So that image there is kind of how our tracking sheet was. I had the date, who was on it, what we talked about, what we had listening wise. Great for grant reporting purposes and just for your own knowledge to know, like, how are we doing? Was this week better than last week? Was this space better than the other one? How could we have made it better? I'm happy to share that with anyone as well. And yeah, lingering questions. So I think almost every week, sometimes we had questions come in that we didn't get to in the space or came in after we were done. And I would go back and answer those questions that came in, and people found that people were very appreciative when I still like went back and like messaged them and answer directly. So, okay, I tried to talk fast.
You talked so fast. It was great. Does anybody have any other questions? I think we answered the one about length, about under 30 minutes. So in case we didn't, that's there. All right, I'm going to be really quick about your website and then some leveling up tools. Basically, most likely when you're doing community engagement on these other platforms, you're probably going to send people back to your website at some point to close the loop, either with a story that comes out of the community engagement or the story that you're talking about during the Twitter space or something. Make sure that when they get to your website that information is really easy to find, because if you're doing community engagement, not audience engagement, these people are likely brand new to your website and they're looking for one specific thing. If they can't find it, they're probably going to go away. So make sure you fulfill the promise of your community engagement call out or listening session. And then you can also ask for more feedback on the story that came out of that community engagement, something that we talk about doing a lot, and be transparent about the process, not just because it builds trust, but because it lets those people who are new know that they have indeed found the right story. Like, this is the story that we made from the listening session or the Q&A that we did on Instagram. They know that they're there. They'll keep reading it because they were part of it, perhaps. So real quick on the website, leveling up, you can extrapolate everything that we talked about onto different platforms, all the ones that I put on that overwhelming slide at the beginning. So Reddit, a lot of the tools that you learned in the Facebook groups section of this are going to be really useful on Reddit. Once you know how to navigate that website, it's really great for just sitting and listening to what people are saying, kind of lurking in a subreddit, which is a forum on a specific topic, to learn how people are talking about that topic. You might even find a source within that. You can message them and potentially start talking to them. I know people who have done an entire podcast that's out right now because of time that they spent on Reddit forums. So it's really powerful in that way. Clubhouse is Twitter Spaces. Twitter Spaces copied Clubhouse. So everything said in the Twitter Spaces section can work on Clubhouse. Matt, do you want to say something quick about texting tools?
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there, depending on what your budget's looking like and what your goals are with different types of texting. Great way to build communities and get in touch with people directly. We do have a couple tools on our website that talk a little bit more about engagement with texting tools. So if you're looking for any of that, feel free to shoot me a message. I'm happy to share some of the information I've gathered earlier this year.
Newsletters, we did a whole training on how to engage on that one, so I won't dive in. WhatsApp, you guys drew some great connections about that and like interacting in other Facebook groups or your own Facebook group as well. And then Lindsey has spent some time learning a little bit more about TikTok, so I'll let her share what she learned in that real quick.
TikTok is just like this thing I keep thinking and dreaming about doing. And, but this actually came from a presentation that our education community engagement specialist listened to from the Washington Post TikTok guy. He's kind of the main guy who does all their posts. And she was kind of talking to me about what she learned from that. And we were having this conversation about, what we could do with TikTok. And one of the things that really stuck with me was this quote that's on there, and that you're a guest at the dinner party, not the host, meaning like you're just there to contribute to what's already going on. You're not there to entertain everybody. You're not there to invite other people. You're just there to like bring a dish to pass kind of thing, to add a little something to the conversation. And really, I think that's a way you can think about a lot of different social media platforms in terms of and how you use them. So you're just there to, people are already chatting about this thing, and here's like some interesting tidbit of information that would make sense to add to this. And you think about how you can do it in a entertaining short video.
Awesome. If you guys have questions, we are happy to stick around, or at least me and Matt. Lindsey might have to jump and go be an editor somewhere, but we can hang around for questions, and you can always email us, Slack us. I will share out this recording and reshare the handout that has a lot of this information in it. Also share the slides, and you can Slack us. So